As our renovations came to a close, I had one of those spots that had just never been finished. At the back entry I'd built the stairs and the landing, but it all went to nowhere, and after heavy rain, at ground level it became all messy and muddy. It's the perfect spot for a decked boardwalk. This project uses many of the basic techniques of building a deck, but it doesn't have the structural needs because it's not carrying a real load. It's also quite close to the ground. It's recommended for situations of around about 400 millimeters or less in its finished height and on reasonably level ground. Here are the tools I used. Now, sizes and quantity are going to vary with your project, but here's the materials you'll need. Main part of this project is that we create what's called a joist-in bearer frame. So the bearers are the beams running around the outside, and then the joists sit in the middle at the same level. Now in my case, I'm going to be fixing off to an existing structure on one end, but you can easily modify the design that I'm using to make it freestanding. And the real beauty of this project is that you can tailor it to suit virtually any situation. Start with the set out. In my situation, I'm having a step down, so just marking for a regular step height. That's around 180 millimeters. Then use the square and level to transfer the measurement to adjoining structures as a height guide. I'm going to dress my boardwalk and surrounds with the same timber as the slatted screen, so I'm adding that at the correct height now to the existing deck face. Using the tape measure and set out paint, mark for one side. Position the framing square aligned with this, and using your straight edge as a guide, mark for the end, then repeat for the other long side to get back to the start. Remember that set out is only rough at this stage. Cut one piece of 140 by 45 to length for a side bearer. Position your support and then use the small square to check its plumb. Mark for the bolt holes for support. If your boardwalk's freestanding, then mark for the post supports at both ends. And then pre-drill with the 12mm bit. As my deck's near ground level and not carrying a load, I used fishtail anchors for my supports, but you may prefer to use stirrups. Place bearer in position, check measurements at both ends, and then use a spade to mark out for the support holes. Remove the bearer and dig the hole to around 400 millimeters deep, but this will vary with your soil type. Looser soil means you need larger footings. Reposition the bearer and this time bring it up to height with blocks and clamp it in position as you do. I pre-drilled and added one 150mm construction screw where my bearer joined the existing structure. Using one screw at the top allows for adjustments in height while still holding the bearer in place. A check on level with the long level, and then I add two more screws to fix that end securely. The first anchor or stirrup can now be fixed off, tightening securely. Double check level, and I use the framing square to check the corner, or use your tape at both ends to check distances. The first support can then be concreted in place, ensuring that the concrete is mounded a little to keep groundwater away from the support. And of course, for a freestanding deck, concrete both ends in at this stage. Now you can clear away any grass and level the ground as you need. In my case, the next step was to add a joist hanger to support my other outside bearer. You can nail or screw these hangers on, but if screwing, use the larger holes as the screws will catch on the nail-sized holes. Cut, pre-drill for supports and position the second bearer and use your long level to check level lengthways and from bearer to bearer side to side. Use your tape to check spacings. Bolt on your support and then concrete in place. Measure from side to side on the ends and cut pieces of 140 by 45 to suit. Pre-drill and secure with 150mm construction screws, adding at least 3 at each join. Internal joists need to be spaced at centres of no greater than 450mm. We needed 2, so measured and added joist hangers on the inside at the appropriate points at both ends. Measure and cut 2 140 by 45 pieces to length and drop them into place before nailing off. And don't scrimp on the nails or screws, as this is what really helps tie your frame together. Depending on your overall length, you may need additional side supports. We placed ours at 1400mm centres, so needed an additional 2 down each side. These can be dug, fitted and concreted in now. Through the centre joists, additional support is required, and here we use the instant foundation pads. I positioned these roughly in the centre of the 2 joists. Measure the 90 by 90 post, cut, position, drill and bolt in place with the 150mm bolts. The bearers and joists now need to be tied together with blocking, sometimes called bridging. Measure and cut 140 by 45 timber to size and block through, securing with the nail gun or 70mm nails. I placed mine at 1000mm centres. I'm hiding the face of my bearers with timber to match the slats nearby, but this means I need to create extra blocks to fix off to. I just used some offcuts for this. If you're doing this and you use 140mm Merbau decking, it will conceal the bearers without the need for blocks. It's easier to add these face boards prior to decking. The back of the boards need to be rebaited to allow for bolt heads. Markers needed. Set your saw to make a suitably shallow cut and cut each side of the marked area. Then make multiple cuts around 5mm apart through the centre before cleaning it out with a chisel. Nail in place, and if you plan to paint anything, it's easier to do this before adding the decking, as you won't have to worry about paint splashes or masking the decking off. At this stage, I'm adding a level step down area and drainage to fix one spot I know stays quite wet. Start by digging a trench for the ag drain pipe to take the water away. This is only around 200mm deep. Then cut and install the 150mm by 25mm H4 edging, securing with the edging or plinth pegs. If you use a rubber mallet, this avoids damaging the galvanising. Pre-drill the ends of the edging board and then screw together with decking screws. Drop the pipe into place, cover with drainage gravel, then cover the step down area with drainage fabric. This will stop the rest of our gravel from sinking into the soil. Add a layer of drainage gravel, then dress with a thick layer of decorative pebbles. The drainage gravel is a lot cheaper as fill than the decorative pebbles, and dimension wise I made mine 600mm deep in the two main step down areas, and then along the main face I made it 200mm deep, and the timber edge will make my mowing so much easier. And it's time to get decking. Check your widths at the end and in the middle, it should be the same. I'm allowing for a 40mm overhang on each side. I bought my 140mm Merbau boards in pre-cut lengths, so I only need to trim a little from each. First square off the ends and then cut boards to size. Lay the cut boards out along your work area and then position the first board. Due to the length of my walk, I knew one board would have to be cut down in width, so I started decking from the freestanding end to keep a full board there. Take the time to get the position of this first board accurate. Fit one drill with the countersinking and pre-drill bit, and then screw into place. Each board must be screwed down on its edges and to each bearer and joist. A real trick with laying is getting spacing between boards consistent. I like to use these 4mm plastic strips that come from Yellow Tongue floorboards. You can also buy them as electrician's cable feeders. And that's the decking underway. Just repeat for each board, checking your measurements as you go to make sure you don't drift off your line. Now, a couple of little finishing things. I like to fill the gaps in front of the edging with a coarse sand, as this makes for better drainage. And you want to sand a slightly rounded edge onto the end of your decking boards. This will stop them splintering or chipping with foot traffic. And that's it, an elegant all-weather boardwalk to finish off our back entrance.